Millionaire woman marries shy baker to win a bet. What she learns after. Wedding changes everything. The champagne flowed like liquid gold at the Montauk estate, where New York's elite had gathered for Camilla Rothschild's annual summer gala. Vanessa Drake, 34 and worth just over $300 million thanks to her revolutionary beauty tech company, stood on the terrace overlooking the Atlantic, bored out of her designer shoes. These gatherings were all the same people. The same conversations about portfolios and divorces. The same desperate attempts to outdo each other in increasingly absurd ways. It was Camilla herself who proposed the bet that would change everything. The women had been discussing their romantic disappointments, each trying to top the other with tales of fortune hunters and ego-driven disasters. Camilla, 3 martinis deep and still bitter from her latest breakup, challenged the group. Whoever could marry the most unlikely, ordinary man and stay married for 6 months would win the pot $5 million each from the other participants, plus bragging rights that money couldn't buy. The rules were simple. The man had to be working class, no knowledge of their wealth, and the marriage had to be legal. Photographic evidence of domestic life required. No prenups that revealed net worth. The women would have monthly check-ins to share their progress. It was cruel, perhaps, but in their world of infinite resources and finite thrills, it seemed like harmless entertainment. Vanessa agreed partly from boredom, partly from the competitive streak that had built her empire, while the other women immediately began strategizing about finding construction workers or firefighters' careers. They found quaintly masculine. Vanessa decided on a different approach. She would find someone so ordinary, so far from their world, that her victory would be undeniable. 3 weeks later, she found herself in Millbrook, Vermont, a town so small it barely appeared on GPS. She'd driven there on a tip from her assistant about a harvest festival that would attract plenty of authentic working-class men. Instead, she found herself sheltering from an unexpected downpour in a small bakery called Rise and Shine, the only establishment open on the sleepy Main Street. The bakery was a time capsule, worn wooden floors, mismatched chairs, the smell of fresh bread so intoxicating that Vanessa forgot she hadn't eaten carbs in 5 years. Behind the counter stood a man who seemed to embody the space itself, quiet, unassuming, hands dusted with flour. Liam Hart, according to the name tag he wore crookedly, moved with the careful precision of someone who had learned that sudden movement startled people. He was handsome in a way that would never grace magazine covers, soft brown hair that fell into green eyes, a jaw hidden behind stubble that suggested he forgot to shave rather than chose not to, shoulders broad from kneading dough rather than gym sessions. When Vanessa ordered, he blushed at direct eye contact, stammering slightly over the prices. Perfect. Vanessa extended her stay in Millbrook, returning to the bakery each morning. She crafted her cover story carefully, a freelance writer working on a novel, seeking small-town inspiration. Liam accepted this without question, gradually warming to her presence. He would save her a corner table, bring her coffee without being asked, sometimes sitting with her during slow periods to discuss the book she pretended to read. The seduction, if it could be called that, was almost insultingly easy. Liam had been alone for so long that Vanessa's focused attention overwhelmed him. She learned his routine. 4 a.m. starts to begin the day's baking, closes at 3 p.m., evenings spent reading or walking his ancient golden retriever, Murphy. His life was small, contained, predictable. Vanessa told herself she was doing him a favor, bringing excitement to his mundane existence. Within 6 weeks, she had him. The proposal was calculated for maximum impact, public enough to be remembered, private enough to seem sincere. She chose the town's harvest dance, waited until Liam was relaxed from the local cider, then suggested they make their relationship official. His surprise was genuine, his joy heartbreaking in its simplicity. He said yes with tears in his eyes, apparently overwhelmed that someone like Vanessa would choose someone like him. The wedding was 2 weeks later, a small ceremony in the bakery after hours. Vanessa wore a simple dress ordered online, her $4,000 shoes hidden under its hem. Liam wore his father's suit, altered to fit but still carrying the scent of mothballs. The town turned out in force, delighted that their shy baker had found love. Vanessa's photos for the bet showed her smiling beside her flour-dusted husband, the contrast striking enough to ensure victory. Moving into Liam's apartment above the bakery required every ounce of Vanessa's acting ability. The space was clean but cramped, decorated with inherited furniture and photographs of people she didn't recognize. Liam had cleared half his closet for her, a gesture so earnest she had to excuse herself to the bathroom to compose her expression into appropriate gratitude. The first month passed in a blur of performance. Vanessa played the role of small-town wife, helping in the bakery, learning to operate the ancient cash register, pretending to care about local gossip. She documented everything for her monthly check-ins, photos of her flour-covered apron, videos of Liam teaching her to braid challah, selfies at town meetings where she fought to stay awake. Her competitors were struggling. Camilla's construction worker had Googled her after 2 weeks. Another woman's mechanic turned out to have a wife in another state. Vanessa was winning by a mile, her baker husband too trusting to investigate, too grateful to question. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she found herself unsettled by aspects of Liam's life she hadn't expected. The way he knew every customer's name and preferences, how he donated day-old bread to the food bank, often delivering it himself to elderly residents. His quiet contentment with a life that would have driven Vanessa insane within days. There was something almost zen-like about his acceptance of each day as sufficient unto itself. More disturbing were the glimpses of depth beneath his shy exterior. Liam read voraciously philosophy, poetry, history. His apartment was lined with books, margins filled with notes in his careful handwriting. When he thought she was sleeping, she would hear him working through complex musical compositions on a keyboard, creating melodies that belonged in concert halls rather than bakeries. One evening, she found him in the bakery after hours, decorating a cake with an artistry that belonged in galleries. The fondant flowers were so realistic she reached out to smell them before catching herself. When she complimented the work, Liam blushed and explained it was for a young customer's birthday, a girl whose family couldn't afford anything fancy but deserved something special. These moments accumulated like flour dust, coating Vanessa's conscience with a fine layer of discomfort. She pushed through, reminding herself of the bet, of the triumph waiting at the 6-month mark. But doubts crept in during the pre-dawn hours when Liam rose for work, pressing a kiss to her forehead. With hands that smelled of yeast and possibility, 3 months in, something shifted. Vanessa realized she had stopped taking photos for evidence, stopped viewing their interactions as performance. When Liam laughed rare but genuine at something she said, the warmth in her chest wasn't satisfaction at playing her role well. When he held her during a thunderstorm, knowing without being told that she feared them, the comfort wasn't feigned. The check-in calls with her competitors became exercises in deception of a different kind. She shared the required evidence, but found herself editing out the moments that felt too personal to commodify. Liam dancing with Murphy in the kitchen, the way he hummed while kneading dough, his face when he thought she wasn't looking, soft, with an affection that made her chest tight. As autumn deepened into winter, Vanessa's carefully maintained boundaries began to crack. She caught herself enjoying the rhythm of bakery life, anticipating regular customers, feeling proud when she successfully managed a complicated order. The designer clothes hidden in storage seemed to belong to a stranger. Her manicured nails, now short and often flour-dusted, felt more honestly hers than the perfect extensions she'd worn for years. But it was Liam's past, revealed in careful increments, that finally shattered her assumptions. The shyness she'd marked as weakness came from a childhood stutter, overcome through years of speech therapy, but leaving him cautious with words. His parents had died when he was 20, leaving him the bakery and a mountain of medical debt he'd spent a decade paying off. The simple life she'd scorned was built on sacrifice and resilience she couldn't fathom. One night, as snow began to fall on Millbrook, Liam showed her a box of letters from customers. Thank you notes for birthday cakes that made wishes come true. Messages from people who'd found comfort in his bread during hard times. Photos of weddings where his creations had centered celebrations. An entire community's love, documented in flour-dusted envelopes. Vanessa held those letters, understanding finally what she'd missed in her original assessment. Liam wasn't ordinary, he was extraordinary in ways her world didn't measure. His wealth was connected, his success measured in the daily bread that sustained his neighbors. He had built something her millions couldn't buy, a life of genuine purpose and quiet satisfaction. The realization that she'd fallen in love with her husband hit Vanessa with the force of a Montauk wave. Not the calculating interest she'd performed, but real, terrifying, life-altering love for a man she'd chosen as a joke. A man who trusted her completely while she built their marriage on deception. A man whose quiet strength made her empire feel as insubstantial as spun sugar. As their 6-month anniversary approached, Vanessa faced a choice that made all her business decisions seem simple. She could complete the bet, collect her winnings, and return to her real life with a story that would entertain for years. Or she could do something she'd never done in her calculating existence. Tell the truth and hope that love could survive honesty. The morning of their 6-month anniversary arrived with a blizzard that shut down Millbrook completely. Vanessa woke to find Liam already gone, down in the bakery preparing what breads he could for neighbors who might venture out. She lay in their bed. When had she started thinking of it as theirs? Listening to the familiar sounds of his work through the floorboards, each thump of dough a countdown to her confession. She had planned to tell him that evening, after the dinner he'd been planning for weeks. But as she descended the stairs to help with the morning rush that wouldn't come, Vanessa found Liam standing very still in the center of his kitchen, holding his phone with an expression she'd never seen before. On the screen was an article from a New York society blog, complete with photos from Camilla's summer gala. The Millionaire marriage bet, how 5 women wagered on love. The piece detailed everything, the terms, the participants, the progress reports. Vanessa's photo smiled from the screen, identified as the front runner with her quaint baker husband in Vermont. Liam looked up at her, and the pain in his green eyes made Vanessa's knees weak. But worse than the pain was the lack of surprise, as if some part of him had always known he wasn't worth choosing for himself. He set the phone down carefully, the same way he handled delicate pastries, and returned to his dough without a word. The silence stretched between them like taffy, sticky and impossible to navigate. Vanessa wanted to explain, to contextualize, to somehow make it better. But every word that came to mind was insufficient. How could she explain that what started as a game had become the most real thing in her life? That she'd fallen in love with him not despite his ordinary life, but because of it? Finally, Liam spoke, his voice steady but soft. He told her he understood. Of course, someone like her wouldn't really choose someone like him. He thanked her, actually thanked her for 6 months of feeling special, for the experience of being loved, even if it wasn't real. He would sign whatever papers needed signing, wouldn't make trouble. He just asked that she leave quietly, without making a scene that would turn him into a town joke. The dignity in his response broke something in Vanessa. She sank onto a flour-dusted stool and for the first time in her adult life, told the complete truth. Not the polished version she'd been preparing, but the messy, ugly reality. The boredom that had made her agree to the bet. The condescension with which she'd viewed his life. The gradual realization that everything she'd valued was worthless compared to what he'd built. She told him about the competitor whose carpenter had turned out to be an undercover journalist, about Camilla's spectacular failure when her target discovered her net worth, about how the bet had collapsed months ago, but Vanessa had hidden that fact because she couldn't bear to leave. She pulled up her phone, showing him the messages from her assistant begging her to return, the emails about her company suffering without her presence. But most importantly, she told him about learning to see wealth differently, how his savings account might be modest, but his life was rich with connection, how her penthouses felt like prisons compared to the warmth of his apartment, how she'd spent her life accumulating things while he'd built something that mattered. She told him she loved him, not the idea of him or the challenge he'd represented, but him, Liam Hart, baker and philosopher, and the kindest person she'd ever known. Liam listened the way he did everything, quietly, completely, without interruption. When she finished, he turned off the oven and sat beside her. The morning light through the bakery windows caught the flour in the air like snow, creating a globe around them. He asked questions that cut to the heart of things, not about her money or her life in New York, but about her intentions now. What did she want? Who did she want to be? The conversation that followed was the most honest of Vanessa's life. They talked about trust, how to rebuild it when the foundation was rotten. About identity, whether Vanessa could exist without her empire, whether Liam could accept that empire as part of her. About love, not the movie version, but the daily choice to see clearly and stay anyway. Liam revealed his own truths. He had suspected something was off from the beginning. No freelance writer drove a car that expensive, had hands that manicured, or struggled so visibly with small-town life. But he'd chosen to believe because the alternative that he was being used was too painful. He'd fallen in love with her. Contradictions, the way she tried so hard to fit in, the moments when her real self broke through the performance. He showed her a notebook where he'd been writing about their relationship, trying to make sense of it. The entries revealed a man far more perceptive than Vanessa had credited, someone who saw through her facades, but chose to love what glimpsed beneath. He'd been waiting, he admitted, to see if she would ever trust him with the truth. The blizzard raged for 2 days, trapping them in the bakery with nothing but flour, water, and honesty. They baked bread together, Liam teaching Vanessa the meditation of kneading, the patience of rising, the transformation that came from simple ingredients and time. She told him about her company, her innovations, the rush of building something from nothing. He shared his dreams, not of wealth, but of expanding the bakery's community programs, of teaching kids to bake, of creating spaces where food meant connection. By the time the roads cleared, they had reached a tentative understanding. Vanessa would return to New York to handle her responsibilities, to officially withdraw from the bet, to figure out how to merge her two lives. Liam would continue running the bakery, would think about whether he could love her knowing everything, would decide if trust could rise like dough after being punched down. The separation lasted 3 weeks. Vanessa dismantled the bet, returning the entry fees and facing the mockery of her peers with newfound indifference. She restructured her company to allow remote management, promoted key employees, and began the process of relocating her primary residence to Vermont. Her board thought she'd lost her mind. Her therapist thought she'd finally found it. Liam used the time to visit his sister in Boston, the first vacation he'd taken in 5 years. He walked the city streets, visited museums, sat in cafes reading philosophy. He thought about identity and change, about whether loving Vanessa meant losing himself or finding a larger version of who he could be. He talked to Murphy, who listened with the patience of a dog who'd seen everything. When Vanessa returned to Millbrook, it was without fanfare. She drove up in a rental car, her designer luggage replaced with practical bags, her nails short and unpolished. She found Liam in the bakery, decorating a wedding cake with sugar flowers so delicate they seemed to breathe. He looked up at her. Arrival and the smile that spread across his flour-dusted face was answer enough. The reconciliation wasn't simple. Trust, once broken, required daily restoration. Vanessa learned to be transparent about her wealth, involving Liam in decisions about charitable giving and community investment. Liam learned to be comfortable with resources that could transform his humble programs into regional initiatives. They fought about money, about publicity, about the strain of merging radically different worlds, but they also discovered that their differences created something stronger than either could build alone. Vanessa's business acumen transformed the bakery into a teaching kitchen that served the community while generating sustainable revenue. Liam's philosophy tempered Vanessa's drive to accumulate, helping her find satisfaction in depth rather than breadth. They remarried a year later, this time with full honesty. The ceremony was held in the bakery, attended by an unlikely mix of Vermont locals and New York elite. Vanessa wore a dress she'd bought at the local thrift store, altered by the same seamstress who'd hemmed Liam's father's suit. The cake, made by Liam with Vanessa's assistance, was a masterpiece that told their story in sugar and fondant city skylines melting into Vermont mountains, bitter coffee beans becoming sweet bread. The vows they exchanged acknowledged the unconventional beginning, the pain of deception, the choice to build something real on a foundation of lies transformed by truth. Liam promised to see Vanessa clearly, wealth and ambition included, without losing himself in her world. Vanessa promised to value what couldn't be monetized, to measure success in connection rather than acquisition. Their life together became a testament to the possibility of change. The bakery evolved into a community center where kids learned math, through measuring ingredients, and chemistry, through the science of rising dough. Vanessa's company pioneered programs that brought technology to rural communities, bridging digital divides with the same innovation that had built her fortune. They kept an apartment in New York for necessary business, but home was above the bakery where their story began. The space that had once felt cramped to Vanessa became a sanctuary, filled with the smell of fresh bread and the warmth of shared purpose. Murphy, ancient now but still devoted, served as a reminder that love didn't require words or wealth, just presence and patience. 5 years after the bet that brought them together, Vanessa published a memoir about the experience. It became a bestseller not because of the sensational beginning, but because of the harder truth it revealed, that real love required seeing clearly and choosing daily, that wealth meant nothing without connection, that the most extraordinary lives often looked ordinary from the outside. The book's dedication read, "To Liam, who taught me that the best things rise slowly and are worth the wait. And to everyone who's ever been someone else's bet, you're worth choosing for real." In the end, the millionaire who married a baker to win a bet lost everything that didn't matter and gained everything that did. The baker who married a millionaire discovered that love could survive deception if it was brave enough to embrace truth. Together, they proved that the most unlikely combinations, mixed with honesty and time, could create something that nourished not just themselves, but everyone fortunate enough to share their table.
Thank you for watching this story unfold with us here on M&A The Story Unfolds. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new tale. We'd love to know where you're watching. Leave a comment below and tell us what part of the world you're joining us from. Your support means everything. See you in the next story.